All right, here we go. We have Keith K.P. Presley, also known as Chicago's Black Scarface. Welcome to VladTV.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here, man. It's a real treat.
Well, a lot of stories have been told about you, but I really want to get the real from the person. So I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in Chicago.
Yes, I did.
In the Wild Hundreds.
Indeed.
Okay, on 103rd, right?
10 Trey.
10 Trey. So what was that like in the 70s?
The 70s, it was very pleasant. It wasn't nothing, no criminal activity that I knew of because I lived a very square life.
Okay.
And my parents, both my parents together, they both worked. One worked in the steel mill, one worked for CTA, Chicago Public Transit Union. And I was just an atypical kid in elementary school in the 70s.
Okay. And as you're growing up, you go to high school, you go to Percy L. Julian High School.
Mighty Jaguars.
Okay. And at that point, are you completely square, not doing anything, just an athlete and going to school?
Square as a pool table and twice as green.
Okay. Okay. So you graduate high school and you're actually an athlete. You're a wrestler, right?
Correct.
You go to college.
Yes.
Eastern Illinois University.
Yes.
So what was that like when you first went there?
It was a beautiful experience for me because I never inspired to go to college, really. But I ended up getting a scholarship for wrestling and went to Eastern and just became an adult there. I went in a kid, came out an adult.
Okay. And this is the early 80s, like 82,
82,
83?
yes.
Okay. So here you are, you're going to college with aspirations to do sports and get a degree. Then at one point you meet someone that kind of changes your trajectory.
That's true.
Okay. And who was that?
A friend of mine on the college campus, he came to my came to my apartment and he was like, man, I need to use your place. And long story short, he wanted to chop up some drugs in my place. And that's when I became introduced to that. And I'm like, whoa, he can do that. I could do this. And that's where the bug bit me at.
Okay. That was cocaine?
Yes, that was cocaine.
Okay, so what? He just had like an ounce, and he wanted to bag it up.
An 8-ball.
8-ball.
A whole 8-ball.
Okay.
Whew, he was balling.
Okay. So he breaks it up, bags it up in your house, and then he brings you into the.
No, he didn't. He went on about his way. He bagged up like $500 worth of stuff, and I'm like, damn, that's $500 worth. That's $500. 500. We talking about 1986. $500 is like $5,000 right now. So I'm looking at like, wow, he's gonna make. And he said he had it all them sold basically, and I'm just looking at like he ain't no different than me. He can do it, I could do it.
Okay, and at that point, have you ever tried drugs?
Never been. I'm 57 right now. I've never been drunk a high day for in my life. Never tried it. Never knew what a drug dealer was until I became one.
Okay, so even in the neighborhood where you were, you didn't see drug dealers, drug addicts, nothing else like that?
No, I grew up very middle class. I mean, it was people that did drugs, of course, but wasn't nobody hanging out on the corner, wasn't nobody nodding out, wasn't nobody shooting each other. And then I was an athlete. I was a star athlete, so I stayed in that realm. I hung with people that was trying to lift weights and run and, try to get scholarships and stuff like that. So I never hung in the streets, never, gang bang and none of that kind of stuff.
Okay, but now you got introduced to this fast money. And do you go and buy some yourself at that point?
Exactly. So I initially went, the guy who introduced me to the game, he turned me on to his connect, and I went and caught me an 8-ball.
Okay. So now you have an 8-ball.
Right.
And
so
you need customers.
Yeah. So the funny part about it is when I went to go buy the drugs, he gave it to me in an 8-ball. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I ain't got no bags. I ain't got no nothing. Like, so he told me he charged me another $25 to bag it up and mix it up for me. You know what I'm saying? So that's how green I was, man. I didn't know nothing. All I knew I was going to double my money. That's all I knew.
Okay. And how'd you get your customers initially?
I talk about that in my book where I was just on the block and one of the guys said he finna go get some cocaine. I'm like, I got some. And they thought I was joking because I'm not known to be a street dude and I'm a comedian in the hood. So they looking at me like, yeah, right. I'm like, man, I got some. So I ran to the house and brought all of my, 20 bags? I brought all 20 bags out. Like, look. So he bought one and he took a bump because they wasn't freebasing then. He was just a snorter. He took a bump and like, man, this is some good shit. And he bought another bag, and then I left there and went to shoot some dice with some cats, and lo and behold, these guys was in the back room freebasing, and the rest of history, man. I made $500 in one day, and that the greed set in instantly. Like 500 in one day, it was effortless.
Right. And the next 45 days, you made around 40,000.
In 45 days, I made $30,000.
30,000.
Yes.
Okay. And for being a college student, you're basically rich at that point.
I went from having a couple of $100 to having $30,000 at my disposal in 45 days.
Okay. So you essentially, and you talked about this in your article on As Is, you went from being a college student selling drugs to a drug dealer that was in college.
Yes, that's true. Because even though, matter of fact, when I first started in 1986, up to an 8-ball was a misdemeanor for cocaine. So you got guys doing 30-year sentences now for 8 balls when they changed the law in 87, when it's crack. So it's 100 to 1. So if you had some prior convictions and stuff, so it went from being a misdemeanor to like getting real major time. So I understood that I wasn't a small time, because when I first got in the game, I bought an 8-ball, and then in 45 days, I'm buying a quarter key. So,
okay.
And I was in college.